Alright, we're going to start with a high level overview of the fight, then we'll discuss team compositions, what units to bring, and then we'll close with some key tips and tricks for an easy clear. There are three primary phases to this fight. The first is a tank and spank, the second is the invincibility phase, and the third is the fire spirits. In the first phase, there are really only three things that you need to worry about. Number one and most important is stacking together as a group. Number two is having one person on point for cleansing and healing the team, and number three is don't stand in the fire. Two things happens during the first phase. The boss will apply a debuff called Dragon's Breath, which can only be cleansed if your units are healed to full health. The boss will also do a large AoE heal block that pushes your units back. This also needs to be cleansed. Because these debuffs are continuously being applied, the most important thing during the first phase is to stack together so heals and cleanses are shared across the party. The boss itself does not do a lot of damage. Most of the damage being dealt will come from the debuffs applied, so the main focus here in the first phase is to heal off the Dragon's Breath and cleanse off the heal block. After the second big AoE heal block, phase 2 of the fight starts. The boss will cleanse himself and apply a buff that greatly reduces damage taken and is only removed when you bring his health down by 1%. During this time, the Dragon's Breath debuff will also be continuously applied to the team, so it's important that you continue to heal to remove this debuff during this phase. After the buff is removed, the boss will fall asleep, and you have 15 seconds to really open up DPS. This is the only DPS check in the raid, and after the recent nerf, it should be fairly easy for everyone to pass. After the 15 seconds is up, the boss will fly into the air, and phase 3 begins. In phase 3, fire elementals will spawn in the center of the field and move to attack the seal stones located west, north, and east of the map. The fire elementals spawn with a large shield that can be removed when you apply CC effects such as freeze, provoke, or silence, so you may want to swap in a unit to assist in applying CCs. 2 out of 3 seal stones must survive or the party will wipe. If one seal stone is destroyed, the boss will gain his ultimate gauge, and if the ultimate gauge is fully filled up, he will also wipe the party, so it's safest to just protect all 3 seal stones. During this phase, the boss will also attack from the sky with fireballs and flame breath that applied the Dragon's Breath debuff. So it's important to avoid these attacks while you are killing the elementals. If you do get hit with the debuff, running into the seal stone bubble will protect you from the damage, and you can use that time to heal off the Dragon's Breath. Once all the fire elementals have been defeated, the boss will use his ultimate skill, so you want to run back into the seal stone bubble to protect yourself from that attack. Use that time also to swap back in your core units, because at this point the fight returns to phase 1, tank and spank, followed by phase 2, invincibility, for 2 cycles before the boss is defeated. So there you have it, phase 1, tank and spank. Stack together as a party, be on point for the heals and cleanses, and don't stand in the fire. Phase 2, invincibility, you'll need to do enough damage to remove the boss's buff, while healing the team to remove the Dragon's Breath debuff. Phase 3, Fire Elementals. Apply CCs to remove the Fire Elemental shield, protect 2 of 3 seal stones, and dodge the attack from the sky. If you can manage all of these mechanics, you should all be able to clear this raid fairly easily. Moving on to team compositions. One of the most important units to bring is a healer that can also cleanse. Lulu is definitely what I prefer and what I recommend, but Annabelle works as well. I would also highly recommend bringing a sustained support that can shield, such as Bastet or Wusa. Remember that the Dragon's Breath debuff can only be cleansed if your units are healed to full health. So if they remain at full health because of a shield, you'll have a much easier time managing the debuff. DPS support is also very important to get past the invincibility phase, where the boss takes significantly reduced damage. Having defense break or brand, or having attack speed buff from the hard, or having crit damage buff from the jack-o'-lantern can really help you get past this DPS check. For that same DPS check, I recommend bringing at least one per member of the party, a damage dealer that ignores beneficial effects. These units will ignore the boss's buff during the invincibility phase and deal their normal amount of damage, so they can be very helpful in getting past that phase. Once you're confident in passing the DPS check, you can start to sub in or add in addition to damage dealers that have a multiplier based on the number of debuffs, such as Naomi, Argan, or Crow. They'll significantly speed up your runs, but remember, these units are not very helpful during the invincibility phase, so only do this if you're consistently getting past that stage of the fight. For those just starting out, I would recommend a team composition that looks like this. It's a bit safer, but it ensures your bases are all covered in different roles that you need. You're bringing in 2 healers that can also cleanse, 1 unit that can shield, 3 units that can help increase DPS, and 3 units that ignore beneficial effects. You can sub in different units rather than the examples that I provided, so long as they fit the same role of the unit that you're taking out. Now let's take a look at a full fight run through so you can get really familiar with all the different stages. I'll also give you some key tips and tricks throughout the fight. The first is, if you can't hit the bonus of 351k, go into the lobby and enter the fight with the bonus, and then swap out for your core units after you've entered the raid area. Remember, the first stage is the tank and spank. You want to make sure you remember 3 things. Number 1, stack together as a party. Number 2, be on point with the heals and cleanses. And number 3, don't stand in the fire. The boss will start the fight with 4 big red meteorites that you can see that fell on the ground. You want to make sure you dodge these because they will continuously apply the Dragon's Breath debuff. You can see that our team is actually ignoring all of the boss's attacks, the triangles, the small circles, because our cleanses and our heals are very on point, and it helps the run go faster if we just stand there and tank and spank him. Here's the first big red AoE heal block. You can run out of that red circle and avoid the heal block, but we've also found it faster to just tank the boss and cleanse the heal block off. So you can see we got past the very first invincibility phase fairly quickly. You didn't really see the purple buff on the boss because we got rid of it very quickly, and now he's fallen asleep. You now have 15 seconds before he flies into the air, and phase 3 of the fire elemental starts. On the fire elementals, there's 3 pillars. The north pillar is always going to be the easiest, the east pillar will be the second easiest, and the west pillar will be the hardest based on the number of elementals that go to each of those seal stones. And so you can see right here, I'm in the east pillar, Erifert is in the north pillar, and Trills is in the west pillar. During this stage, you want to apply CCs. I swap in Waterfall Tractor to help apply CCs to the units to remove their shield and then take them down fairly easily. While you're fighting the elementals, you also want to avoid all of these attacks from the sky because they will apply Dragon's Breath debuff and will make it much harder to manage the fight. Remember, if you do get hit with Dragon's Breath during the fire spirits, run into the bubble in your seal stone and that'll protect you from the damage while you heal it off. If you have the time to, after you've killed your elementals, see if your party members need any help. Remember, 2 of the 3 seal stones must survive, but even if one goes down, the boss will significantly increase his ultimate gauge. And if one unit dies in the party after a seal stone has been removed, then the boss will have a full ultimate gauge and wipe the party. After the 3 seal stones have been protected and all the fire elementals are dead, the boss will use his ultimate skill. You want to stay in the bubble during this time. It'll protect you from that attack. Afterwards, you revert back to phase 1 and phase 2. You go back to tank and spank, and then the invincibility phase again for 2 cycles. So over here, you can see we're tanking and spanking. After the second AoE heal block, the boss is about to cleanse himself over here, and we enter the second invincibility stage. During this time, you just need to do as much DPS as possible while also cleansing your units. So you can see we got past that phase fairly quickly. You now have 15 seconds to get the boss down. If you can kill the boss in these next 15 seconds, you skip the third invincibility stage. In this particular run, we didn't have enough damage output to skip the third invincibility stage, so the boss goes back to phase 1, tank and spank, and then he'll enter the third invincibility stage. So he just did his heal block, he's now going to cleanse himself and apply the damage reduction buff to himself. And from here, it's just the same thing that you did in the first 2 cycles of this. After the recent nerf, everybody should be able to clear this raid fairly easily, so long as you, number 1, bring the right team compositions, number 2, you understand and can manage the mechanics, and number 3, everybody is able to help contribute to get past the DPS check. Good luck, everybody.